Hey guys, I'm here with my friend James Henson and former coach. James, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, my name is James Henson. I live here in Lubbock, Texas with you. And, these days I'm a life coach. I have a newsletter, a paid newsletter that people subscribe to. And I teach some classes on meditation, some classes on anxiety. I was a therapist for about 10 years. And before that, I was a adjunct professor at universities and a social worker. So I think for the last 20 years, I've worked with people for about 20 years now.
Yeah, you've had a lot of experience, been through a lot of different things, so it's always cool to hear your past journey.
It's definitely been a journey for sure.
Yeah. So James was the first person I ever went to get professional help, and he taught me meditation, which was huge for my mental health and also part of my spiritual journey. So today we're going to talk about meditation, mindfulness. So do you want to kind of go into what is meditation and mindfulness?
I think at its core, meditation is a training of attention and awareness. I think that most of us don't notice because we don't pay attention to our mind. We think we are our mind. But when you really start to pay attention to it, you notice how your mind is constantly jumping from thing to thing to thing. And this seems to be getting worse and worse these days as attention spans are diminishing because of how we spend our time and what we put our attention on. So meditation is really training the mind how to stay on one thing for extended periods of times. It can be the breath, it can be counting, it can be a candle, it can be sounds, just listening to the sounds around you. And there's different ways to do it. I think when we think of meditation, what we're often thinking of is like formal meditation. A person, sitting with a certain posture for a certain amount of time, things like that. And I'm a big advocate of that. That was so instrumental in changing my life. And then mindfulness. So mindfulness and meditation are often, used interchangeably, but they're not. They shouldn't be. Meditation is the bigger umbrella. Mindfulness is a type of meditation. And it's the one that I invested the most in. And mindfulness is awareness of the present moment. And what I like to add with that is that, you have to have a form of acceptance with that non-judgmental awareness. And for me, I think that there needs to be an element of friendly curiosity. That's the big thing to me, is the friendly curiosity. So the non-judgmental awareness, if you notice, the mind is constantly judging everything around us. Yeah, I like this, I don't like that. I like this, I don't like that. And we want more of what we like, and we want to chase it. We want to reject what we don't like. And then we don't necessarily notice this, but a whole lot of stuff in our awareness gets put into a neutral bucket or an uninteresting bucket or a bucket of I just don't care about that. So there's things we're missing out on all the time that are going on around us. Mindfulness is about cultivating a state of being where you're not in that constant flow of, like, dislike, positive, negative, good, bad, and just simply learning to be with things as they are. And I think that the friendly curiosity element helps a lot, because instead of judging, you are leaning into everything and kind of seeing like, ooh, let's see what happens here. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, it seems like whenever we can be mindful and have that non-judgment, that allows us to see a situation more clearly and kind of, because we all have, biases, and we all have preconceived ideas of what things are, and so we bring those to whatever situation we're in. So when we're in a new situation, we can be quick to judge what that is or reject it, and so that non-judgmental awareness helps us to really see it more clearly and see what it actually is, and come to a better understanding or better decision making on what to do in this particular situation, or see someone for who they are more than what we might judge them to be off of first glance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really kind of shocking when you first realize how much time you spend making judgments about things. We rarely deal with other people as they are, situations as they are. And to some extent, we can't deal with them as they are. We're a conceptual species. We put everything into terms of concepts. But the more that we can get underneath those, the more that we find that everything is really okay. It's most like 99% of all the situations we encounter are neutral. They may be inconvenient to what we wanted, but our mind wants to categorize them as wrong. You know, I'm driving, I get a flat tire. My mind wants to say, "Oh, this sucks. This is unacceptable. I just bought this tire." And then I get out and I find out I've got a screw in it, and my mind says, "Oh my God, why can't the city do a better job of sweeping the streets?" Or, why don't people pick up after themselves? When really, tires going flat is the natural state of the universe. You have to keep airing them up to keep airing them. It's doing what it would naturally do. Screws falling off of trucks and embedding themselves. It's the way the world works. And before we start investing in mindfulness, we find ourselves living in opposition to reality all the time. And over the years, as this has been my practice, and this has just kind of gotten to be where it saturates my life, I find that I don't have as many opinions on things. I don't have as many frustrations with things. Red lights, we call them red lights for a reason. They turn red and we stop. That's what allows traffic to flow without wrecks all over the place. Yet, when I hit a red light, my mind wants to say this is not okay, especially if I was not mindful before I left and I'm running late. A line at the grocery store. Of course there's lines. Everybody's going to one spot. When you get there, it takes a certain amount of time to take care of that task. Of course, people are going to bottleneck there. And it's not inherently unpleasant in itself. You're not in pain. Nobody's beating you up. You're in an air-conditioned building surrounded generally by people who are not doing anything mean to you. What's the problem? Well, I want to be somewhere else. I want to be headed home. I just got done working all day and I'm tired and I shouldn't have to stand in this line. And so mindfulness and meditation too just really brings forward the stories that our mind is telling all the time. And they're rarely helpful stories. Because we have a negativity bias as a species. If you're in a room with 1,000 people and one of them wants to kill you, you're going to think about that one person because the other 999 ain't a problem. If you are in a beautiful room where everything's nice and it's a good temperature and you're on a comfortable chair, but there's a fly buzzing around, you're going to notice the fly because your mind doesn't have to notice all the things that are going well. Those things are not a threat. They're going to take care of themselves. And so I think that mindfulness and meditation is a really helpful way to kind of plant a flag on the other side of the equation of saying, a lot more is going right than going wrong. And I can accept the things. I can tolerate. I can lean into the things that I'm not happy about. I can explore them with a friendly curiosity and see what happens.
Yeah, that's great. So I think that you can practice mindfulness without meditating, but you can't meditate without then having at least some mindfulness throughout the day. So do you want to kind of talk about, does that make sense to you? Or
yeah, it does. It does. So you can practice mindfulness without meditating. And that's true. Those would be called informal mindfulness practices. And that's what you see that is usually sold to you on Instagram or, little tips and tricks to be more mindful. Nothing wrong with those. But what I tell people is that if a person's really serious about getting in shape, they tend to go to the gym. Maybe they get a trainer. They kind of change their lifestyle. They have a formal practice of getting in shape. Then there's I'm going to park a little bit farther out at the store. I'll take the stairs instead of the elevator. That's a more informal way of maybe getting in shape or losing weight or something. The first one's going to be a lot more effective. And so I always encourage everybody to, especially at the beginning, have a formal practice where you pick a time, you pick a place, you pick a certain length of time that you're going to learn to actually sit and meditate. That's where I see people have a real change in their behavior, a change in the way they do things. The informal practices are great. Go for a mindful walk, no headphones, just, notice your steps, notice the temperature, notice the sounds, sit in the park and, just be there. That's awesome. I think that's good and that's helpful. I don't think that would have changed my life the way meditation did if it hadn't been a dedicated formal practice for a very long time. Right. And so Yeah, but you can't really be mindful without meditation because the mind will not stay in the present. It's going to jump all over the place. Before you know it, you're at the park and you're enjoying, you just notice the weather, you notice the temperature, you notice the sound of the bugs, but then somebody let their dog poop on the grass and didn't pick it up, and your mind's moving into judgment, or you hear a horn honk, or your mind just says, "Oh my gosh, when we get back to the house, I need to do this, this, and this." So the two go hand in hand. I think the two go hand in hand. And for me, like even when I've taught meditation, we've always had both. We'd start with mindfulness, have a time of concentration meditation, and end with mindfulness.
Yeah, that's great. I totally agree. And so I think you talked about thoughts. So we're not our thoughts. I think obviously too. I think goes along with that is emotions. So we can also examine our emotions, and we're not our emotions, and but we're the awareness behind these things. And I also think that meditation, mindfulness really helps us with freedom, which is, we kind of touched on it, but it's giving space between our reactions and allowing us to take more control over our impulses, our reactions, our patterns, habits.
Oh, every talk I've ever given on this, and I've given a bunch at this point, I start with the quote from Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose. And that's what was so important for me about it was, before I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what meditation was. I'd never heard of it. I stumbled into it. And this idea that I am not my thoughts, I am not my emotions, I can choose my response to those things was, I don't know. I don't think I could exaggerate how important that was. Before that, I was just a creature of stimulus and response. I wanted to do something, I did it. I didn't want to do something, I didn't do it. It led me to all sorts of trouble over the course of my life. All sorts. I was a nightmare of a human being when I started really looking at this stuff. And I initially got into it because I wanted to be detached from my emotions. I wanted to be detached from my thoughts. I wanted to be this, this hovering godlike Zen Buddhist, But what I found was that it actually gets you into closer touch with them. So the first few times I got into meditation were brutal because I'd spent years and a lot of time and a lot of substances trying to avoid them. But once you get in touch with them, you start to recognize a few things, like thoughts come and go. All these thoughts that we take so seriously, 99% of them are absolutely ridiculous and unnecessary. They're narrating your day. Walking around like, I wonder where my keys are, and oh, there they are. Who am I telling? I see them; they're right there. Wishing something was different. Imagining it's a ridiculous way to live. And then our emotions just drive us to so many behaviors. And when you have a little bit of space between those things, it's not about repressing them. It's not about ignoring them. But it is about choosing your response to them. And the really interesting thing you notice with emotions is that, number one, they're rising and falling all the time.
Right.
I'll be sitting there in meditation and, it would be like 4:30 in the morning. Nothing's happened yet. And I notice like fear and then anger and then anxiety and then happiness. And nothing's going on around me to spark these things. It's almost like my body or my mind is throwing something out there trying to get my attention. And when you don't feed those emotions with thoughts, they come and go very quickly. That was super important to me because I could literally take a small slight against me and hold on to it for years. I could nurse one emotion, one angry thing for years. And I made major decisions on it. I cut off entire friend groups. It was never helpful, but I never thought any different because I was like, well, I'm angry. This is the truth with a capital T. And so finding that space that you mentioned, that was huge. It didn't work out the way I wanted, where I was going to be all detached from it. I'm much more in touch with my emotions these days. And I'm grateful for that because it's made everything better for me.
Right. I think one thing that it also does, one particular way of meditating that I love is body scanning. And so it helps getting in touch with our bodies, which, our bodies feed our emotions and our thoughts as well. And so we can start to tie in like, oh, I have this tension here, and then I can feel into that and be like, oh, well, that's tied to an emotion, and which is tied to generating thoughts. And so I think it just helps you be more holistic with your body, your mind, and your emotions.
Yeah, when I first started, I was very disconnected from my body. I think I wanted everything to be all spiritual. So when I started reading, my initial course in all of this was Zen Buddhism, and so when I read about they'd say, the posture matters, the body matters. I was like, ew, I don't like that. Right. I just wanted to be all spiritual. But what I really wanted to do was escape being human. I just didn't want to I didn't want to deal with all this just messy stuff of being a person. Right. And they went the opposite, and it brought me back in. But yeah, with your body, I tell people, like, if you're feeling a certain way, notice, like just notice your jaw, notice your shoulders, notice your breath, notice like, where are you carrying tension, and when you can release that, it's super helpful. It's super helpful. But I think we discount the role of the body and everything.
Yeah, it's been interesting, kind of getting more into Eastern, like Hinduism, Buddhism, and that a lot of that is it's less of religions in a way, and it's more of like a way of living, and that learning that they spent hundreds of years meditating and feeling into the body, and learning these scientific things about the body and about the posture and all these things that we now know scientifically, but they just knew from feeling into it intuitively themselves, and so we're starting to incorporate into the West these Eastern practices, and we have tons of studies on the benefits to meditation and mindfulness.
Oh gosh, so many. Yeah, it's I see a new study every week, it feels like. So, and I see it's becoming mainstream now. Right. It's when I first started teaching this, out here where we are, there was a lot of resistance to it. There was you had all these connotations of like New Age mysticism, and which I don't even know what that means. Like how do you quantify that? But as people like take the practice into their lives in a real way, they see benefit to it. And you don't have to believe anything to do it. You don't have to believe in Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity or anything to meditate. It's a matter of taking a few moments to just sit and be with this experience of being a human. Like there's no philosophy or ideology to that. Noticing, what am I feeling right now? What are my thoughts about that? What are my feelings about that? What's it like to just feel it without this filter of the mind? The mind wants to tell us about our experience all the time. Like you're not experiencing it. It's those, like, they're the worst people in the world. That's hyperbolic, but they're terrible people who they want to watch a movie. They want you to watch a movie. They love a movie, and then they sit there and tell you about it all the time. That's what the mind does. Like those people drive us up the wall, but we tolerate it from the mind for some reason. And it's because we think we are the mind.
Right.
But you are not your thoughts. I do all the time. I tell people right now, don't think of a basketball. But there you go. You're thinking of one. And if you're trying not to think of a basketball, you're conceptualizing it through its opposite. It's just this reflection of reality all the time, and we somehow take it super seriously. And we let our thoughts tell us what other people are thinking. We let our thoughts tell us why somebody did something. Every time if I send a text to somebody and they don't reply, my mind starts a whole story about why they're not replying. And that's awful because that I'm the worst text responder on the planet. So I do it to people all the time, but then my mind makes this whole story about it. It's a ridiculous way to live. We've got this obsessive tyrant in our head. And the only reason it gets away with its behavior is because we have mistakenly taken it to be us. And ask everybody around you, what do you mean by me? What do you mean by I? They can't tell you.
Right.
They can't tell you. Yet we let this thing run the show. So I think meditation is just kind of a way of getting under and behind all that, where you can observe it. And one of the best byproducts of it is you become unable to take yourself very seriously. I took myself very, very seriously when I was younger. Just completely self-absorbed. Main character syndrome, they call it now. Oh my God, I had that before the internet had diagnosed it as a thing. How often I laugh at myself now, and I laugh at the demands I have, and I watch my brain just throw these things out. Who do they think they are? Oh my God, it's hilarious. It makes all this so much easier when you realize that these things are popping in and out of existence inside of you, and you're letting them run the show. Mm-hmm. So it's a much easier way to live. I've tried multiple ways of living, and not taking yourself so seriously is one of the better ones I've found.
Yeah. Obviously, when we can slow down and realize we're not our thoughts and our emotions, that it helps give elasticity to our beliefs and understanding, and so realize, maybe we don't have it all together, maybe we don't know everything, and maybe we can consider other people's perspectives and beliefs more, and so that's the path of growth, and seeing things more complexly, and being okay with paradox and mystery.
And I think that may be more important now than it's ever been in human history, because this is the first time in our existence as a species that we are able to cultivate our perception of the world, our perception of other people inside an echo chamber. Mm. You can, no matter what you believe, you can go on Reddit or somewhere and you can find a group that tells you you're exactly right. And in that, they're also going to tell you what other groups are wrong. Mm-hmm. That cognitive flexibility, I'm seeing it decline in people, where I meet people who will tell me like broad things about certain groups. And when I'll ask them, like, well, who do you know? Who in this group treated you so poorly? They don't know anybody. Mm. They don't know a Christian or a transgender person or a whatever group they're so terrified of. They don't know anybody from that group. And so that cognitive flexibility is just being worn down by the echo chambers. Mm-hmm. If you're on Facebook and it tracks you all over the internet, it's going to bring you stuff that supports the view you already have. You go on Reddit and you only subscribe to subreddits that align with what you think of the world. I don't know that we've ever been able to do that in human history. It seems really dangerous to me. Meditation and mindfulness is a way of being able to maybe step back and say, wait, where am I getting this story from? Why do I feel this way about this group? Mm-hmm. And when you track that down, when you trace it back, you realize a lot of it's being fed to us through different outlets.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you, but also, this is a new age of information, and we're becoming aware of so many different groups and so many different belief systems and ways of living and all that. And so we're having to get used to that and what that means. And Absolutely. Obviously that's what leads to what you're saying. I need to get inside my group and reinforce my beliefs because this is threatening, this is scary, this is overwhelming. And so meditation, mindfulness helps us deal with that better. and
it'll help with the flexibility that you need to deal with that, but it'll also help you deal with the physiological effects of that, of anxiety, of just recognizing, oh my gosh, I'm in fight or flight right now. This is a system in my body that was meant to shut down rational thought so that I would act quickly and stay alive. A big part of the problem these days is that we're trying to deal with, social and political issues with the same system, with a system that was designed to help us deal with wolves.
Right.
Immediate threats right in front of us, when most of us rarely face immediate threats anymore. Our threats are all future-oriented, they're existential, they're philosophical. Those groups that we were talking about, when I asked people, like, what scares you so much about them? It's just what they could impose or what their ideas could mean. It's way different than seeing a wolf in the woods and your brain running through the list of, okay, do I flee? Do I fight? Do I freeze? And at the end of that, when the encounter with the wolf or the bear or whatever, you ran and you escaped, you've kind of processed out all the stress. You fight and you survive, you process out all the stress. But at the end of it, it was over. It was over. The threat was gone. The threats never leave anymore. Mm-hmm. They're always there. And there's a massive industry that makes billions and billions of dollars off of keeping us under threat.
Right.
And so being able to recognize that, and I think have compassion for others, have compassion for ourselves, that's the toughest conversation over all my years. Social work, therapy, mentoring, all the stuff. The hardest conversation for people in the West, I think, is self-compassion. How would you treat yourself if you treated yourself like the person you love the most? It's been amazing to me to see how hard that is for people.
Right.
The most angry people have ever gotten at me, shouting at me, throwing things at me, storming out, have been with the suggestion, maybe be kinder to yourself. It is such a hard concept for us. But in meditation, you have to learn that, because it's all these pictures we get. People picture meditation. It's always some woman in yoga gear on the beach and she looks all peaceful. Sometimes meditation is brutally hard. Especially when you're first leaning into those tough emotions. I started hanging out with the Buddhists here in town for no other reason than I couldn't sit by myself for more than 25 or 30 seconds. When I went to sit with them, I knew that my ego wouldn't let me walk out in front of a bunch of people. So I leveraged my ego against my fear of my emotions. And that's how I really learned to sit for long periods. It's a really, really hard thing. And so I think that's one of the big misconceptions about it, I think, is that you're going to sit down and be peaceful automatically.
Right, yeah. And I would just tell the audience, if meditation is new for you, just approach it like the gym in a healthy way, in that it's a muscle you have to build.
Absolutely.
Don't go out and just lift as heavy as you can, and you're going to burn yourself out real quick. So meditation, I would say, start out 5 minutes a day, something like that, and then build it up over time.
That's exactly what I recommend. The number of people who I've worked with who, I've taught it, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm going to do it for 2 hours every day. And I would always tell them, don't do that. That's going to overwhelm you. No more than 5 minutes. And I always tell people, don't go over 20 minutes. Stop at 20 minutes. And there's people who get real serious about it and want to sit for hours, and that's cool. That's kind of its own path. But for the students I had and for the groups I had, we maxed out at 20 minutes. That's plenty. That changes your brain. That changes your perception. But I think as Americans, we kind of want to go we want to go to the extreme on everything.
Yeah, it's kind of an ego trip.
Absolutely. Well, Ram Dass said, enlightenment's the biggest ego trip. And so that's what you got to be careful of, is that meditation doesn't just feed the things that you're actually trying to get a little distance from.
Right. Oh, and too, talking about group, there's definitely power in group meditation. Where two are gathered, I do feel more focus, more energy, more power in that. It's great.
I was so resistant to stuff like that when I first started all this, because that sounds like hippie nonsense. Holy crap, that is so true. Meditating in a group, it's just, there's nothing like it. That's one of the things I don't struggle with it, but it hasn't really recovered since COVID, is groups. Even the groups I've taught and stuff, I think you were part of one that we had 14 the day before, and it dropped down to 2, if I remember right. And so that group aspect's missing. But the group we had downtown here for a long time, that was really cool. By the end, we would all sit for 20, but sometimes more than 20 minutes. And with the people, there is an energy you feed off of. I don't know how to quantify it. I don't know how to explain it, but it's very obviously there. And anybody who's in this field will tell you the same, I think.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue into the next part, that, obviously you can use meditation just for the physical, mental, emotional benefits, but I do think it can be a very spiritual thing. I always like referring to the verse, "Be still and know that I'm God," and just thinking that, and if you're having conversations with someone, it's I'm talking, then you're talking, and we're feeding off each other. And so if you're having conversation with God, if you're doing all the talking, how are you hearing from God?
Right. Meditation is more of a listening, isn't it?
Right.
That's a weird shift for me, because when I started this whole thing, the whole reason I got certified as a mindfulness and meditation instructor, the whole reason I did that was because there was nowhere else in town that was teaching it from a purely secular scientific point of view, a pure mental health point of view. That's how I've always built it. Is that's been my niche in it,
Right.
But here over the past few years, as my beliefs have changed and shifted, the spiritual aspect of it is more and more important to me. The listening in that, I think what some people would call an inner intuition, I now call God.
Holy Spirit.
Yeah, Holy Spirit. I think that quieting the mind is so important. And that's the other thing I think that is unique about our time period. We've never had this many distractions.
Right.
Now, I'm only 44, and I already feel old in so many ways, just because of how the fabric of the world has changed, how the basics of society, how we interact, all that is so different. And I think that makes it more important than ever to find ways to quiet your mind and to not be so engaged with, like, there's no chance for boredom anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's not. It's actually something that concerns me, is that like a lot of my best ideas
That's
and
where creativity comes from.
Absolutely. And nobody's ever bored anymore. I love going on long car rides by myself, driving somewhere, because I usually don't listen to anything at all for probably 2 or 3 hours out of it. And that's where like all my best ideas come from. Barbara always laughs because I come back from a trip and I'm like, I've got 15 new projects that I came up with. That being able to be still and know that I am God, you know, just hush and see what comes up is harder and harder these days, because you've got so many really like good distractions, not good in the sense of like good, but like really effective distractions. Right. You know, I wonder, what's on Facebook? What's on Instagram? I better go check the game I play
instant
on my
gratification.
Instant gratification. And it's almost addictive.
Yeah.
Actually, I was padding my words there. It is addictive. I think we're seeing it in young people especially. And meditation is that's the opposite of that. It's simply sitting and doing nothing, you know, just being. And it's such a counterintuitive thing for so many people these days.
Yeah, and along with that, it's stress or pain, tolerance, endurance, working through that, and boredom is part of that. And so when you can get instant gratification, it's like anytime there's something wrong in life, or you feel any kind of negativity, it's like, automatically find the instant gratification. I mean, I fall into it all the time, so
right.
Yeah, it's tough.
I know when I deleted, you know, I was really active on Instagram and on there every day, interacting with people, doing all that. When I quit, even though I didn't like it, I didn't enjoy it, I had like a withdrawal when I went through it, and I've withdrawn off some very hard things in my life.
Right.
It wasn't as bad, but it was the same thing. It's so interesting to watch that. And you know, I keep my phone locked down, where I don't have apps on it. I use it to text and call. And I don't do either one of those very well. But I will notice that when I notice that there's times where I'm like, you feel drawn to it. You feel drawn, like I want to go see what's happening. What's on the news? What's on Facebook? What's the next thing that I can learn? And that's always times like when I notice that going on in myself, if I stop and pay attention, I'm stressed out about something. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm angry. I'm lonely. All the halt thing that you know that everybody knows.
And that stuff keeps us in the mind and out of our body.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in a state of comparing, in a state of judgment. You know, that's you're scrolling through Instagram and they got to go on vacation, and they got a new car, and they're so physically fit. That dude's way better looking than me. It's that constant comparing mind. And I think that's pretty destructive to us. Right. I think it's probably fatal for kids, teenagers. And so meditation is a completely counterintuitive, different way of doing things. Mindfulness is counterintuitive and a different way of doing things in a world that's constantly telling us, you, like, what do you think of this? We want your opinion. Do you like it? Click this button. Do you want to comment your opinion?
Yeah.
Nonstop. Instead of, why do I care what I think about this? I say that to myself all the time. You know, I read about, the threat of AI. Why have an opinion on that? That is so far above my pay grade. Like people like Elon Musk can't do anything about it. Like, what am I going to do? The weather. Why do I have an opinion on this? It's ridiculous. But this online machine is constantly, hey, what's your opinion? Tell us about it. Share it. I bet people will click like. I bet people will validate it. And if they don't validate and they argue with you, then you have to reinforce your own opinion by arguing with them. So it's a very counterintuitive, countercultural practice, which is interesting because it's growing and more people are doing it.
Yeah, I got to defend myself here because I got an episode coming up about AI. So no, I totally agree with you in that. It's like why should I form a hard belief about something and be dogmatic about it?
Right.
And also too, like, there's so many distractions. Like, what do we focus on? So I think it's good in like helping us, meditation, mindfulness, like what do I need to focus on? What is most important? Yeah.
Right. Well, even like with AI, I mean, it's notice like the dominant thing you're hearing in the news is the threat of it. These are the ways that AI is going to ruin the world. But we're all using ChatGPT.
Right.
You know, like literally in that article, you could see an ad for ChatGPT and click on it. Mm-hmm. It's that constant opinion making, but it's almost always fear-based because that's so easy because of the mind's negativity bias.
Right.
It's so much. Walk up to somebody and walk up to a group of people and try to get them to engage in conversation about something good versus walk up and say something ugly about somebody. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, everybody piles on that. They love it. That's just how we're wired. Mm-hmm. But I think that we have to push against that. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny to me because I do hear people all the time talking about the threat of AI and all that. But ChatGPT is probably one of the more popular things on the internet now. Mm-hmm. Like if we're all so terrified of it, why are we training it? Right. You know, like we're giving it on the job training every single day. It's that contradiction inside of us, but they're exploiting the fear side. Mm-hmm. That's what gets you to click on things. That's what you see an article about, 10 wonderful things AI is doing in the world. You might skim through it. But if there's an article, 10 ways AI is going to kill your children tomorrow, that's going to get more clicks. Mm-hmm. It's the way it works. Mm-hmm. It's that attention economy that they're all fighting for a spot in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of attention, going back to meditation, mindfulness, I think, we were talking a lot about how it's a discipline and how it's helpful, but I think it can be a part of the spiritual thing. It can be very blissful, and you can have very amazing spiritual experiences. I've had feelings of bliss and energy in my body that I felt, and I would say like love and joy, and just I feel like it's connecting with God and who He is, and also with who I feel like my true self, my spirit, being a part of the Spirit of God is, and like the fruits of the Spirit.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely part of it. And that's what people are usually going and looking for. I think what's important to remember with that, though, is that it's just another mind state. Mm-hmm. You can't attach to it. Right. The second you try to cling to that or you make that your goal, you're pretty much eliminating your opportunity to ever find that again. Right.
Yeah. It's like, I wanted to achieve this that I've achieved before in my meditation. Then you're not achieving because you're like striving for it, which is creating like tension, and then you're not going to get it. And so, I think the Buddhists and all that are don't get attached to the experiences and spectacular, but just the practice itself. But
non-striving, non-striving is a term. It's really about being able to be with whatever arises without judgment. And now when we say judgment, we often think of a negative connotation. But we conflate judgment and condemnation. We're all making judgments all the time. Every time you come to a four-way stop, you're making a judgment. Right. When you are at the store and you're trying to figure out how much you can buy on your budget, that's a judgment. We all need to judge. Judgment's very important. But what we probably need to avoid is the judgment with condemnation. But in meditation, we need to avoid judging something to be wonderful and then making that what we strive for, because then it becomes just another fixation, and you're chasing it all the time. And so a lot of people I've worked with over the years, the standard thing is you breathe in 1, breathe out 2, make it to 10, start over. I've had people who I've had to stick them at 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, because they turned it into a competition with themselves. I made it to 10 4 times in that meditation. Awesome. That is not what this is about at all. That is not what we're doing, because then you're not with the moment. You're with the next moment, the next number up the ladder. Right. And I've seen people get really attached to those bliss states. And the problem is that when you have that attachment, number one, it's going to make your normal everyday life, it's going to pale by comparison. It's going to start to suck. And then you're becoming focused on something that's not there. You're not in the here and now anymore. You're waiting for that next bliss state. Right. And then let's say that you attain the bliss state and you've got it all day. There's part of your mind that's afraid, what happens when this leaves? And so you're not in the present anymore. It's the mind's job to jump to the future. It's the mind's job to think about the past sometimes. It's the mind's job to scan for threats. But if we're not mindful of that, it does those things all the time. I tell people it's like using a hammer for more than it's intended for.
Mm-hmm.
The mind has a purpose. If you use a hammer to put nails into the wall and pull them out, cool, it's doing its job. If you use the hammer to turn off your television or wipe the windows on your car, you've got a problem. It's a tool meant for something. The mind is not meant to be everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a very Western thing. We prioritize intellect over everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what the mind will do. It'll turn meditation into a competition if we're not careful. Right. But that's cool because it's just one more thing to notice, not judge, and come back to the moment in.
Yeah, that's all great. I think you were telling me earlier that you do a lot more praying now and you don't do meditation. Do you kind of want to talk about that transition? And
yeah, so it was back in, I guess it was 7 or 8 months ago, my thyroid went haywire. And it was, I've never felt a fear and a sense of ominousness like this. I never felt anything like it. It was bizarre. Those 10 days, I tell people those 10 days might have been the hardest of my life. And that's saying something because I've made a lot of bad decisions and had some hard times. But during that time, simply sitting and meditating, it wasn't working. And it changed so much for me because I learned that, oh my gosh, all these tools that I've used for so long, there's a place where they don't work.
Right.
And that's this place of physiological where your hormones are going haywire, I didn't know it at the time. That first 10 days, I am who I am, so I tried to gut it out and figure it out, and before I finally talked to a doctor. What I arrived at during that time is that there are places in this life where the only thing you have is God. That's the only thing. And that shifted my practice to where I do spend a lot more time praying, and it's not asking for stuff. A lot of it's just thankful, thank you for thank you for all that. The fact that there's something instead of nothing is so amazing. And then the fact that we have a consciousness with which to experience that something, like what the hell? like that was gifted to us. Like none of us earned that. None of us got it for ourselves. And then the fact that we have a say in how that consciousness interacts with it. Like when I think about that, it fills me with so much gratitude. And so a lot of it's just expressing gratitude. I take very seriously, like, rejoice,
always.
Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Like that's not something that just happens to us. That's a call to action. This is the day the Lord has made. Those things have started to mean a lot to me. And I think a lot of my meditation practice these days is about, I'm going to rejoice regardless of what's happening. I'm going to be thankful regardless of what's happening. And I see the benefit of the years of meditation and mindfulness because, the idea of practicing the presence of God. I'm able to have moments throughout the day where I can just stop and be present and practice that presence and be aware of that presence. Being able to keep my mind on one thing. I'm able to redirect my mind back to, no, we're going to be grateful. And I feel compelled to say, this isn't some toxic positivity thing where I act like nothing is wrong. Everything's okay. It's all good, man. Like I'm not that guy. You've known me. I'm not that guy.
Right. Yeah. Definitely not.
But in the midst of that, my grandma died a week ago, somewhere like that. She was my favorite person in the world. She was the person who, the only person I've ever had in my life who told me you're okay. Like there's nothing wrong with you. The only person I've ever had that made me feel that as a child. And that was a heartbreaking loss. It was very hard. But I can still be thankful in the midst of it.
Right.
I can be with my sadness and be with my grief and still be thankful for things. So it's not a toxic positivity, pretending there's nothing wrong. My job as a coach, a lot of people come to me for, to build something bigger, to create these projects, to do these cool things, but there's always things going wrong along the way.
Right.
And then most of the people who reach out to me for, to come by for coffee and hang out, it's because something's gone wrong in their life. That's kind of my function.
Right.
And so I'm very aware of that, but we're allowed to find joy in the midst of that. Not happiness.
Yeah.
Happiness is contextual, but there can be a foundation of joy and peace. And so I think that's probably my meditation practice these days, is just in being aware of those things and allowing them to be. The mindfulness is so helpful when I notice that I'm watching something that's making me feel worse, or I'm investing my time and energy in something that is not beneficial to me, something that's not feeding the best parts of me. And I have to be real careful of that, because I can throw the best parts of me out pretty quickly when I want to. So, yeah, it's a shift. It's definitely a shift, and it's one that was kind of visited upon me instead of a conscious choice I made, for sure.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think I did a gratefulness journal, and every one thing a day in grad school, and I was in a very dark place. And that was very beneficial, and I did that, and I did meditation. So I think it's kind of like the yin and the yang, the receiving and then the giving back.
Absolutely.
And retraining our mind to focus more on the positive, and to be thankful and kind of give back, I guess you could say. So I think that's a huge beneficial practice.
Yeah, it's probably more of like a spiritual discipline than just pure meditation.
Right.
And I say that because I taught this at LCU, and we'd have a meditation class, and at the end I'd ask people, how was that? And they say, oh my gosh, it was awesome. I just thought about Jesus and how much he loved me, and I'm like, okay, that's awesome, but that's not meditation.
Right.
Like, you were just thinking or praying, whatever you want to call it. But
right.
So I'm not comfortable calling it just meditation. It's something different.
Yeah.
But it's kind of what my life has brought me. And that's something that meditation has taught me, is to be flexible with and receptive to what's coming to me, instead of always like, no, this is what I want. This is the way it's going to be.
Right.
And so I'm trying to be receptive to it. And it's a tough one for me.
Yeah.
I was an atheist for quite a long time. And so it's a change. And there's fear that comes with it. I have a following, and I have people who engaged with the work I do because of the perspective I took. And I'm going to disappoint some of them. I'm going to make some of them mad. Some of them will leave. And so, but mindfulness and meditation have helped me realize, okay, cool, this is present. I have a fear of rejection. I have a fear of losing what I've built. Cool. I still get to choose how I respond to that, and it doesn't get to run the show.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Yeah, this has been awesome. Is there any lasting words of wisdom you'd like to leave the listener?
I was thinking of the most useful phrases. I have a few things that I've said a lot over the years, and you can always tell the good ones because people get a little mad at you over them. I found out a long time ago that some of my clients knew each other, and they had a hashtag for when they were talking about the work we were doing, and it was hashtag fuck you, James. And at first that hurt my feelings because I'm a baby, but it really, what that was it was the things that we would hit on that really hit hard and made a difference to them. But in the context of all this that we're talking about, I think the most useful thing anybody can do is incorporate the phrase "thanks for sharing" into everything they do. When you're in line at the grocery store and the mind says, "Oh my God, why are they going so slow? This is ridiculous. I'm tired, and this idiot is using coupons," and you just say, "Hey, thanks for sharing. I'm going to go back to doing what I'm doing." "Oh my God, another red light. Why can't they time the red lights right in this town? This is ridiculous. I pay taxes and I'm stuck at Hey, thanks for sharing," and go back. I do that with my opinions. I do that with when my mind wants something that's unhealthy for me. It's so you're not repressing it. You're not arguing with it. By arguing with it, you're keeping it present, and just simply saying thanks for sharing. And so when the mind says gloom and doom and all the worst things are coming your way, hey, thanks for sharing. I'm going to go on doing my thing. when the mind's telling you negative things about yourself. You suck and you're stupid. Hey, thanks for sharing. I'm gonna go back to doing what I'm doing. It really brings us into a place where I think it kind of puts the mind in its proper context of throwing out ideas, but we don't have to accept them all. So that's, as I think about those phrases, that was one of the ones that came to mind most readily. So
Yeah, well, that's great. Oh, well, I really appreciate you and your wisdom and all that you've helped me along my journey. I think everything, all that you've done and said has been huge for me. So I appreciate your friendship.
I've appreciated getting to walk that path with you.
Yeah, awesome.